Welcome to the cutting room floor, and we are so excited that you're here as we continue to expand the book of Revelation. This last week, I got to speak and do Revelation chapter 2, the Ephesus church. Pastor Johnny's here today, but Johnny just had a new addition to the family. Tell us about that first.
Yes, happy to be back. Yeah, I was gone for a little bit. Had baby girl number 5. Her name is Karis Adonai, and she's a beauty.
And how was the whole process? Ashley's a trooper, I know.
Yeah, no, it was like I said, this is number 5, and all first 3 were all scheduled inductions with epidurals, which was great. It was like a day at a hotel and just hanging out, having a baby. Number 4 was a surprise, came a week early, felt like a brand new first experience. Actually ended up getting an epidural at 9.5 centimeters because they didn't check where she was. So this time she really wanted to see if she could, just for herself, she could go the whole way. And there's her own personal goal for herself to go without an epidural, and she did it. And she's just the strongest lady I know. And the worst she did the whole time was wince and scrunch her eyebrows, and then a baby came out 3 minutes later. So
That's incredible. Ashley is
awesome.
amazing. Daniela, was that your experience when you had your children?
Not quite. Mine was a little bit more different. The boys came super early at 33 weeks. So,
Oh,
I did not have the option at all to deliver natural anyway. So I knew that it was going to be a C-section. But as far as a C-section goes, it was, you might be surprised to hear this, but it was actually really nice. They just numbed me up completely and then laid me down, and the doctors did all the work, and I was just, hanging out there.
oh my goodness. All right.
Yeah, they're really accommodating, so.
Well, if you are popping in here now, then it's been posted on Facebook and YouTube. Take a moment and share it on your homepage so that other people can pop in here as well. And hit the like, hit the subscribe so that you know whenever we go live, because we don't go live every week. We try to, but when we do, we want you to know about it. And then most importantly, comment. If you comment, we will respond to your comments before the questions I'm about to throw. So make some comments. Let me know about any questions you have with Revelation chapter 1 or 2. And let's get into it. Before I jump into my first question, Daniela does pre and post service. Tell me about that. What's that like? Do people comment? Do you want more comments? How can that be even better? What do you think?
Okay, so one of the best ways to, you know, have pre and post is when people interact with us. Um, And the purpose of that is to just make you feel like you are walking in through those doors on a Sunday morning. This is how you would get greeted. So if you guys, whoever's watching can comment and like, good morning, hey, we're watching from here, or hey, we need a prayer request for this. It's super awesome to be able to interact with you guys, especially when we can just do it live. And like I said, the point of it is to just make you feel like you are part of our church community wherever you are as well. Something that I always repeat is we are one church, not just where we are in our physical location, but where you are as well. And that part of that is emphasizing it and interacting with whoever's watching online. So it would be so awesome. And I still encourage it. I will always encourage it when you're watching on Sundays online. I know some people watch it like through Facebook, or some people watch it on YouTube. So I know interacting on certain platforms can get a little harder, but comment as much as you can.
Yeah, and then comment on comments, because I sometimes I watch online and I'll make comments and then no one says anything and I kind of just stop.
Yeah.
Whereas if people were commenting and back and forth, I think I would be more interactive. I was actually talking to a friend of mine, a pastor friend in Kansas, Lido. You've met him before.
Yes.
And he goes, I really like what you guys do pre and post. We're gonna start doing that. And I go, well, it's good. We do the announcements, we do like giving, we do different things. But the best I've seen is when they are just interacting with people online and commenting,
Seriously, yeah.
and the comments are just flying through because I've watched them do that before, and it's like that's what we want.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Anyway, so if you're someone that watches online, comment.
Mhm.
Okay, so Revelation 2, the Ephesus church. There's a real line here that I didn't know how far to push into, and I thought we could discuss it today. You can ask questions today. What's the line of calling out sin? Because that's what I'm going to assume you've heard the sermon. And, he's commending them for standing strong in the midst of a sinful world. He commends them. He says, I like that you're persevering. I like that you're pressing through and calling out false prophets and all that stuff too. It's great. Great. But you've lost your first love. Why you do it? So how can we know the line of calling out sin? Because we have the same stuff happening today, but show the love of Jesus. How how do we do that? Johnny, what do you think?
Well, he kind of. You ever heard of like the Oreo? Um,
The one you eat?
the Oreo.
I've eaten Oreos, yes.
I know there's like a way to confront somebody, and it's like an Oreo. It's like I think if you say a nice thing and then you deal with the
Oh,
problem, and you say a nice.
that's
I
fun.
mean, that's kind of what he does, right? He like he says something nice and he affirms, and then he deals with the problem, and then he says, "But this you have in your favor, right? You hate to neglect." So to me, I was like, "Oh, look, it's the Oreo." But my point being is, this was the point of this was redemption. John obviously receiving a revelation of Jesus, like it couldn't be anything else but redemptive. Where we get in trouble is we call out sin for wrong intentions. Somebody is being inconvenient to our worldview,
Hmm.
messes with our peace and comfort. And when we would rather that they would just stop versus we want them to be the fullness of Christ in their life, then we're not in the right position to call out sin. Um, we're just, what I call speck picking at that point. You try to pick the speck out of each other's eye when there's a log in our own. So anytime somebody feels like the need to call out sin, that is a very, very healthy and important thing to do and to not just be taken lightly. So if I'm led and have an impression to try to call something out in my brother or sister, um, I'm gonna first take it to the Lord and make sure, God, is this you or is this just me? And I'm gonna put it through the ringer, so I know that okay, I'm coming in a spirit of love and a desire to see them restored, not just hurt or stopped or I'm right and they're wrong or whatever. You know what I mean? So I think we would be absolutely foolish to call people out and have not done that, because then it's not redemptive; it's destructive. And
Yeah.
we've seen it in contemporary culture, I think, and a lot of people have been pushed away because it's just easy. It's so much easier to just yell at people they're wrong and what they're doing is wrong than it is to actually love a person and walk with them through it. Still say the words when they need to be said, but then doing, the lead up, the initial, the follow up, the whole thing. But
Yeah.
we most of the time we don't care about people that much.
I was thinking as you were talking, I realized we do it one on one. Everyone is not everyone. Most people are very kind when someone's struggling with something and they work with them and they move them forward towards Christ. It's beautiful. It's the social media posts. I was at a restaurant yesterday and they were talking about the leadership of our country and just being so loud about how, it's we're gonna win and fix that this year. And I'm like, man, you don't know who else is in this room. Like, I know what you're calling out and I understand it, but man, you just sound like a terrible person. And that's where I'm kind of like, that's the more vague vocal stuff immigration, homelessness, we're just mean versus
Yeah.
showing the love of Christ. Whereas if you knew someone who was
Mhm.
homeless, you knew someone that was, with their child trying to run away from literally trying to be killed behind them, you would love them. So that's the line. And I'm trying to figure that out. Like how do we as Christians show a little bit more love in the vague, open, big world of
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think, Daniela?
I think Johnny pretty much, or Pastor Johnny, like hit the nail on the head. Is that, yeah, hit the nail on the head. Just because I really think that we are called to call people out of in their sin. The Bible literally tells us to like call one each other out on certain things that might happen, might not happen. It depends on the situation. But I really think Pastor Johnny was really spot on saying like it's really the intention you're coming with. Um, are you calling this person out because you have this feeling that I'm superior and I need to fix this? Or are you calling it out because the Lord calls us to be loving with one another? And part of that love is calling each other out in love. Um, so really I think it depends on how you're coming to. There's so many factors when you're communicating with people, your tone, your energy, your voice, how you're directing your words, what words you're choosing to say. So that all factors in, but really you have to think, what WWJD, what would Jesus do? Um, and there were so many moments where Jesus did call people out in love too. So I think that's just something that we have to practice. Um, But that being said, sometimes there are moments where people are so set in their ways, and you just have to say, all right, Lord, now it's your turn. And it's like almost saying, like, we tried this the easy way because I feel like being called to call someone out or like share love or something might be an easy way. Now you're going to have to deal with the Lord. And the Lord will deal with you the way that he seems fitting. Whether that's good or whether that's bad, I don't know. But um, you
Yeah.
did what we're called to do. So,
Yeah. And so I think a lot of people, this is where you'll read the Old Testament and you will see, you know, you deal with sin in very strong ways.
mhm.
I'll just put it like that because there's a lot of death involved. But Jesus comes along and changes everything. And now he's saying, turn the other cheek. He's doing things that everyone's like, what? It's complete, almost opposite. And so I think the game changed right there. But most people are reading the Old Testament, and it's not like you're throwing it out. There's so much to learn from the Old Testament, but the harshness is really changed by Jesus. That's not the part you're supposed to be pulling in. Um, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I'm seeing, that Jesus changed the game of how we treat people. What do you
Yeah.
think, Johnny?
I've heard it said the Old Testament is what happened, and the New Testament is what should happen. And
Mhm.
and I just thought that was kind of, sure that you can argue this, that, whatever about it, but I thought that was a pretty good succinct way to understand it. Um, Again, Jesus has laid it out, and he's thinking, you know, transgenerationally. He's thinking millennia, and just so much more long game. And anytime we dehumanize a people group or a topic and we make it impersonal, that's when it becomes so easy, like you said, to be vague and to just shout out stuff and have our opinions. And ultimately, that's just it's lazy. At the core of it, it's lazy to be, oh, just these conversations that just don't produce any fruit of any kind
Hmm.
uh, about anything, politics, local things going, whatever. It's just like if we're going to talk about something and condemn a people group or a topic, but really have no no foot in the game, no part or plan or strategy to make it better, it's like, what are you even talking about it for? That's not what Jesus did. And when he would call something out, like, it was appropriate and it was right, it was redemptive, it was um like our model. And very little of our um calling out of things in the world is like that. And
Yeah.
two, and this may be just my own personal thing, but I teach my daughters, I'm like, you can't expect a non-Christian person to behave like a Christian.
Hmm.
Like, why would we think an unregenerated mind would have godly morals and decision making faculties? They don't, you know. And it's not
Right.
a right. Okay, go do what you want. You're not a believer, but it's also
Right.
like, it helps me to love them when I don't have a false expectation of what they should be behaving like. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I see that a lot where you first have to help them discover Christ. And then once they discover Christ, then we can talk about righteousness. It kind of moves us
yeah,
into the second question I wanted to hit today. But before I go there, Kevin says, I think one of the struggles is differing opinions regarding which issues are worth confronting. And
mm,
I would agree,
yeah,
everybody has the most important thing in their life right now. And so, as a pastor, I hear it like someone will ask me why I'm not talking about this. Why am I not talking
sure,
about, and I can start naming them off, but there's 10 different issues that people want it to be talked about from the pulpit. And so it's really challenging. So what I try and focus in, going back to what I just said, is helping us become the Christians we're supposed to be, helping people discover Christ for the first time, and then helping people live it out. Because what I see in the New Testament is Jesus working one by one, and it changed the world, right? One by one, having these meaningful conversations, recording it, it was documented. So, we can write books, we can have those kinds of messages out there, but it needs to be in a way in which you're directly affecting someone's life. Because when I
Hmm.
see Jesus do a lot is go after the religious people. So that was my second part of this whole I would say didn't really go very far, but touched on was he calls them whitewashed, uh, where is it? Whitewashed tombs.
yeah,
The idea was in the graveyards, they keep those nice and clean when there's a dead body underneath it. It doesn't make any sense. And that was kind of the point of him saying that.
yep,
Beautiful on the outside, but full of bones, dead, and everything unclean. On the outside, you appear as righteous, but on the inside, you're full of hypocrisy and wickedness. So, where is that? Here's another line issue. The Pharisees versus religious people. Is that the same conversation? Is that the same group that Jesus will be going after today? What do you guys think?
yeah. Um, I think in each of us, because it's not, we call it Pharisees, but Pharisees weren't always, bad. It was like, that's just what it became, when first love fire was let go of. Somewhere along the lines, that whole religious organization, a group of organized people who served God, forgot the why and lost first love and just leaned on routine and practices. And that is always the result every time. And so today we call them religious people, but again, religion isn't bad, but it's been tagged as, if you're religious, it's this idea of you live like hell Monday through Saturday, and then Sunday you ask for forgiveness, and then you go, no, there's no change in it, right?
Hmm.
Or there's the, I need to change your behavior. You are a problem. You need to get saved. And we try to make Christians out of heathens, but we don't care about them or love them. It's all stemming from the lack of first love. We
Yeah.
love because he first loved us. We ever forget that. Um, Pharisee or religious, call it whatever you want. It's the same exact problem and the same exact result throughout time.
Yeah. And now I think the most harm and sadness is when you say church and religious people, and you're not a Christian, you are talking about a political stand, and it's almost always about a political position. And I'm like, oh man, that is not what we should be known for. And that's where I really struggle with where we're going as a this line of calling out sin, because you have to do it. You just have to do it the right way. I don't know. This is why we're talking about it. It's so hard. Daniela, what do you think?
Um, I agree. This is a really hard topic to talk about, really, because like back then in the day, I think it would almost be even more sinful to call a Pharisee out, because like calling a Pharisee out in a position of authority versus like imagine a woman calling a Pharisee out. That would be like I think in that time would be even a worse sin than what like the Pharisee is
Yeah, they'd
committing
probably
instead.
stone her to death. That's a very,
Probably, yeah.
yeah.
And so bringing that back to like in today's society, I mean, it's still pretty relevant. I don't think a woman would get stoned, but I definitely think like there is an issue when somebody in a lower position, and this doesn't just happen like in churches. It happens in companies, in jobs and everything. When a person of a lower position wants to correct or sees a need to like address something to a person in a higher position, it's almost like, who do you think you are? Like, what leg do you have to stand on to like correct this or whatnot? Um, and that's where this situation is really hard to address, because it's like you don't want to cross any boundaries, but at the same time, if the Lord's calling you to say something, the Lord is calling you, and who are we to say no to God? Um, but that being said, I don't know. It's a hard thing to discuss and address, because there's so many right ways to do it, but there's also so many wrong ways to do it. Um,
Yeah.
and that's where we have to tread lightly, but tread with the trust and the faith that, if the Lord is also calling you to do something, you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a big part too, like what we've been saying, this ties in with the religious or the pharisaical spirit, is if something is so moving you, like you said, like God is giving you this impression to speak up on a topic, then we ought to care enough about putting in the time to either get into relationship with the person that you're. So
Yes.
I think first off, Christian to Christian is a different situation than Christian to non-believer. I would
Very,
not call it a non-believer.
very good point.
Yes. Yes.
That. There is a expectation for a Christian who has the Holy Spirit inside of them to walk out righteously. It's not true for an unbeliever. That's where like that. If you're treating an unbeliever like a Christian, then I think you're just wrong out of the gate. But there is instances still where that could happen or take place, but you can't just go at it like, let me just tell you what you're doing wrong. Like you said, Pastor David, you need to like learn that person's story, love that person, get into a relationship. My dad says it this way: you need to earn the right to speak into their life.
Mm-hmm.
And to just walk around with like a bull in a china shop, and that's not loving and that's not redemptive. People, I was watching the show and it had some like the Christians expansion in Europe during like Druidism and paganism and stuff like that. And whether this was true or not, but they always show Christians, like the Crusades, like, hey, convert or die. I'm like, I don't think Jesus is in that at all, you know? And sometimes we still behave that way in how we expect other people to behave And to show true love would be to take the time to earn the right to speak into somebody's life because you actually want to see them restored and redeemed and walking in the fullness. Anything less is going to cause damage on your side. God can do anything. Like even if you are right to say what you're saying, and but you still do it wrong, it's just a bigger mess that God has to work through.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think half the time, especially in social media, I'm asking, who's that for? Because it's a really angry post. So who is it for?
Hmm.
Are you trying to, I mean, obviously it's not going to make a difference in anyone that doesn't believe. So are you just preaching to the choir what everyone you know around you wants to hear? And like, is that what you're doing it for? Is it self-fulfilling in some way? I don't get it.
Yeah.
So I think the question is, yeah, Christian to Christian, we have that relationship. We call out sin, we have a good conversation. We love each other. So the question now is, what do you do when you feel like we're supposed to be, as Christians, the watchman on the wall kind of thing, and call out leadership that leads our world, our city, our states, and our country? How do you do that? How do you still call out things that are wrong, but show Christ? What do you think on that one?
I don't think the Bible's, maybe it does, and hopefully somebody can comment, let me know. But I don't know the place where the Bible says that we are to call out leadership. I know the Bible says we need to pray for leadership, that
Hmm.
one leadership. The same way that I hope people who want you and I to be preaching on certain things, that they would, instead of telling us that, just intercede that we would be hearing from God. I think that's also what God has asked us to do for leadership is to pray and intercede because God is going to hold those people accountable, whatever that means, to whatever
Hmm.
level, for the influence he gave them and what they did with it. And we don't want, the Bible says to fall into the hands of a living God is a fearful thing. And we shouldn't want that for anybody. So hate who you want to hate and dislike what policies you want to dislike. But I mean, if we're thinking about an eternal soul and what that means for somebody to be enduring that kind of spiritual attack when you're influencing this, you know, one of the greatest nations in the world, we're called to pray for them and that God
Yeah.
would step around them and change their hearts, reveal Jesus to them, and just anything else is just going to be, I don't know, behavior modification. And that's not real change. So, I think we just mess up the priorities and we want the result over the process of these things take place. We
Yeah.
want a Christian person who's leading a nation to act like a Christian. And like they need Jesus then. And you don't get Jesus by a bunch of angry people hating on you.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Daniela?
I agree. And I think even in the Bible, it mentions, correct me if I'm wrong, but that there is a time and place for everything. Um, and calling out leadership in certain times and places where, it's just not appropriate. And honestly, just like a general person can understand this, um, is totally valid too. Like there's times and places where like a conversation is truly not relevant and you're just kind of sitting there like, how did this conversation veer from this to this? Um, because again, using discernment from the Lord and um, understanding that sometimes we're also not the ones that need to be calling people out. Sometimes it's just
Yeah.
somebody, you know,
And I don't want people to mishear this because there's many times that people stood for what was right to leadership.
yeah,
And, I'm thinking of like the Quakers in the midst of social reforms, African American Civil War issues. What did they do? They went with them, created the Red Cross, created the ways for people to find safety, to be free, women's rights. I'm just thinking of there's so many times where what the Christians did was, yeah, they would stand up in court and fight for what's right, but they also created programs, stood with their ones they loved to
Right.
help them in need. It's not what I'm seeing now. Now it's, storming the Capitol. Like it's just
Yeah.
stuff that's very, very different.
Destructive, really.
What's being yelled is hate. And I'm like, that's not what the Christians did. That's not what the founding fathers did.
Hmm.
They stood for what was right, but they did it in ways that would make a difference. The Matthew 25 verses that I talked about of when did you clothe us? When did you stand with the stranger? When did you give people food and drink? And I think about, what if all the churches solved homeless issues? They were down there uh, working to feed, creating homes, making a difference. Do you think that would have a greater effect than just yelling at leaders because they caused the problem? Which one's
Right.
going to make a difference if we were in the midst of the issue solving it, and everyone sees the Christians are the one that care, versus just yelling at all the stupid people who did it? What do you guys
Hmm.
Right.
think? I don't
I
know.
yeah, I agree. I mean, and it's like taking action, really, and that's what we're called to do. Take action. Um, Many people may agree, many people may not agree with the action that's being taken, but honestly, nothing speaks more than the actions that you take,
And
is what
we've been
I.
known for that through history. We've been
Hmm.
known for the ones that stood with the lepers, that went back and got sick because we cared for the sick. Who
Mhm.
does people talk about? The Mother Teresa's that were in Calcutta. That's who's talked about.
Right.
What do you think, Johnny?
Absolutely. Again, that's kind of back to what we were saying, the why behind all of it. We love because he first loved us, and the testimony of history has proven true that that's like, oh, it's funny, but like, wow, maybe God knew what he was talking about, or Jesus knew what he was talking about when he lived his life the way that he did, and he asked us to
Mhm.
do the same thing. So it's all more simple than we make it, and we just can't forget our why. We have to keep the cross and the incredible grace and love of Jesus at the forefront of our hearts every day, and then from that be willing to emulate and walk out life like he did. Right? Like that's it. And where we get into all these problems is when we just don't do that. We forget. We kind of convolute or blend the American dream versus Christian, a biblical life. And I think I've seen that a lot where people, I'm talking about the persecuted church in 2 Sundays. And I remember when 2020 was going on and there was a lot of just tumultuous things happening in California. And some of the things I heard, even just some of our own church members say to me, broke my heart, because it was like, that is not God. That is not love. And that is so like me centric and comfort centered. And the things that changed history when people love someone else enough to not care about themselves, they preferred one another over each other. And so we just have to keep that going, in our own lives personally, and then in our ministry. And then God will continue to bless that and reach people and move the church on like, he's been faithful to do. We just can't get caught up in those weeds.
Yeah, you have to wonder after those years. So the amount of pastors, or the amount of pastors retiring or quitting and becoming pastors, I mean, they're just dropping like huge numbers, are way, way lower. Plus, contentment of pastors is gone, just tanked. And you have to wonder, okay, that's the leaders of the church. And because of the church's response to all the stuff that's happened the last 5, 6 years, nobody wants to do it anymore. And do you think that, does that make sense? That doesn't make sense, right? There's a problem here. And
Right.
I feel like this is going too far now. This was too much time to discuss all this, but it's like we have to be really careful And as a church, if I'm going to sum it up, we do call out sin. Absolutely. He commended that. That was the Ephesus church. But we are the difference makers. And just yelling what's being yelled and being angry the way we're angry, it's not working. So how are we going to be difference makers and step up and solve issues as a church? That's what I hope we start being known for.
Clothing the naked. Matthew 25. The clothing the naked, feeding the hungry, being with the sick, visiting the prisoner. All those.
Yeah. What do you think? Any final thoughts, Daniela?
I think Pastor Johnny really wrapped it up well. We just definitely have to be careful on how things get addressed, how we are calling sin out. But ultimately, that is the best way us Christians can grow, ironing, sharpening iron. Fully agreeing and understanding that you're going to address a Christian in a completely different way than addressing a person who is not saved, because their core belief, their core system, the way that they think, that their brain processes is going to be completely different than what a Christian can believe in. So also having the necessary, understanding that not every situation will be addressed the same way. We just have to let the Lord guide us in that sense.
Yeah.
So good. Someone's coming to say bye to us. This is my dog, Jazzy Girl.
Jazzy.
Anyway, love you guys. If you are around the Corscold area or Oakhurst or Madera or Fresno, or you want to watch online, what did I miss?
Or Kerman.
Oh yeah, we
Herman.
have Herman now. Raymond, come join us. This is Yosemite Lakes Community Church. We are working through Revelation, although this Sunday is Mother's Day, so I'm going to switch it up and talk about great women of the Bible.
Woo!
So be here. We have a service at 9 and 11. Both are online as well. Thank you for being here. If you want to still comment, you can. We will comment offline to anything else you put on here. But we love you, and we will see you next week.